Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. We have a new development in a story that we've been following for some time now. It's about the SNP's attempt to remove juries from trials. They don't like juries because juries sometimes give the result that the SNP government don't like. So if they can remove juries, then they can tell the judge what the result should be before the trial even occurs. After all, it is the judiciary that is owned by the SNP government. Why else would Dorothy B. Bain, the head of the judiciary, be sitting in on a cabinet meeting? It's a role, of course, that needs to be split. There is no independent judiciary in Scotland, and so to remove juries means you remove all safety nets for justice, and justice no longer belongs to the people, but purely to the establishment. It will be they who arrest you, they who charge you, they who try you, and they who find you guilty, regardless of the evidence, because there is a quota system needed to ensure that enough people who commit particular crimes go to jail for them. You could be completely innocent, but the judge wants to keep his job. Well, we have got a new development on that, and we're going to have a look at that right now. Now, this is an absolutely fantastic development because the lawyers aren't playing ball, and so whatever they try to do is bound to fail. It will not work because you cannot go to court without representation. Basic law set down in 1215 as part of Magna Carta. Marvellous, isn't it? Well, we will look at this, but before we do, can I ask that anyone who is yet to subscribe, please do so. We've got a lot coming up. It is an election year. You won't want to miss stuff, and it really does help. And we're getting so close now. I can almost smell it, that we're at 10,000 subs, and that would be a remarkable achievement for a channel like this, because YouTube don't push us because we're political. YouTube do not like political channels, and so if we can get to that 10,000, that would be a marvellous poke in the eye, and it would help us spread the truth. So do please hit that button. Anyway, we'll get into this story. It's a good one too. Scots lawyers set to boycott juryless trials, leaving the SNP's controversial plans in disarray. And of course, there's a word there I can't just say at the moment, but you can read it. It's the R word for women. You're not going to be given the option of having a jury. This is the plan, because so few jury trials end with a conviction. Now, I would suggest that this is down to the fault of the police not getting the evidence, or the prosecution not being able to prove the case. It's unfortunate, but that is the law as it stands. It must be proved. Now, if a judge is told that he has a quota system and that he must get, say, 10% or 20%, whatever the rate is, of these convictions to be made, then you could go in and on the flimsiest of evidence that wouldn't pass muster in front of a jury, the judge could use that to prosecute you, to put you in jail for 7-8 years, who knows, and yet you could be completely innocent. And we saw a case just at the end of last year, a man who spent 17 years, 18 years in prison until the DNA evidence proved he didn't do it. And he was in because he refused to accept parole, because parole meant he had to accept that he did it. So he was in there for 18 years. New DNA evidence came out, proved he didn't do it. And the thing is, they sat on that evidence for 10 years because they didn't want to admit that they got it wrong. He's due millions. Now, this is what's going to happen here. You're going to get, possibly imprisoned, convicted, imprisoned, not because there's any evidence against you, but because the judge knows if he doesn't make his numbers, he's fired. Because who controls the judges? The SNP. They have got it that the executive now controls the judiciary. It will be the executive who controls and says who will become a judge and who will no longer be a judge. It is not independent. And of course that means that these judges will be scared into convicting people on the flimsiest or even no evidence, simply because they don't want to lose their jobs. That's not justice. This is why it's going to be good. The Scottish Solicitor Bar Association says the extraordinary proposal to ditch juries will increase the risk of miscarriages of justice and undermine confidence in the criminal justice system. And this is explaining why the conviction rate in murder trials is so much more higher, because it's easier to prove. Scotland's defence lawyers preparing to formally boycott any pilot scheme for juryless trials, leaving the Scottish Government's controversial plans in chaos, because you cannot have a trial without defence representation, and the lawyers are saying no. Now, you can opt to voluntarily do it through the pilot scheme, but your lawyer will immediately say, don't. My legal advice to you is don't. Because you don't want to be in the position where your guilt is going to be assigned by a judge with a grievance, a judge with a target to hit. The Scottish Solicitor Bar Association is set to ballot members on the proposal in the new Victims, Witnesses and Justice Reform Scotland Bill, with the pilot only able to go ahead with the consent of the accused. The SNP's flagship scheme to drive up our convictions now looks completely in doubt. And of course it is. And we know why this came about. It came about because there is a woman, Dorian, her name, Lady Dorian, who is Scotland's second most important legal person, and she is desperate to become Scotland's most important legal person. And she's realised that if she can up the rate of convictions on this particular crime, it will make her look good and she can get promotion and become the boss. But at what cost? At the cost of destruction of justice, the destruction of the entire legal system that's been held in place for time immemorial, where you are tried by your peers, not tried by a jury, not tried by a judge with a political axe to grind. In a statement reported by the Herald, the SSBA said it remained fundamentally opposed to the change, and the body, which represents criminal defence lawyers, said it would be tantamount to professional misconduct for a lawyer to let a client take part in a test trial. It said the pilot scheme would increase the risk of accused persons suffering a miscarriage of justice. It would deliver no discernible benefits for either the justice system or wider society, and it would undermine the public's confidence in our criminal justice system. And it would, because we see, like I said about that case of the man who did 18 years, every time an innocent man is found innocent, having been jailed, it weakens the integrity of the system. People are supposed to be able to trust the legal system. And if that trust is gone, why should they? And that will then lead to vigilantism. Because why should anyone bother going to the police, try and go through the courts, when they know that it isn't going to be effective because the courts are corrupt, they're politicised, they're biased. They'll just take out justice themselves, and that will happen. The statement continued, for the avoidance of any doubt, and despite the huge financial pressures currently being faced by Scottish solicitors and the consequential decimation of our numbers, this is not, and never has been, a question of fees. We are not prepared to take part in this scheme. The statement comes after the SSBA was snubbed by MSPs sitting on Hollywood's Justice Committee, who've not asked the association to give evidence when the draft legislation is scrutinised on Thursday. So they're having this committee where they want to hear what everybody has to say about this brilliant idea to get rid of juries out of trials, because it's a thin edge of the wedge. We'll get them out of this trial, out of this, R cases. Then we'll get them out of M cases, and then this and this and this, until eventually there is no jury trials at all in Scotland, and all trials are decided by the Cabinet, who will then tell the Lord Advocate to tell the judge what the decision should be. Guilt by committee prior to the case. That's what's going to be. And so they're having this committee. They're all going to discuss the evidence. Who should we ask? We'll ask all the experts. Okay, what about the solicitors? Oh no, we won't ask them because we know that they're going to tell us to FRO. They're going to say no. They're going to tell us all the reasons why it's a bad idea. So if we don't invite them, then we don't hear why it's a bad idea. Then the reasons why it's a bad idea don't go into the records. And then we can say, well, we did it on the evidence. And that's what they do. It's like the gender bill. When they wanted to speak to everybody about the gender bill, the one set of people they did not want to speak to were the victims of R. It's funny this. Everything in Scotland seems to revolve around this one particular crime. Either they want to encourage men to do it to women, or they don't want the courts to deal with it. It's a very funny, odd situation to be in. Of course, if you do it to a child and you're under 25, that's fine. You just get, a bit of litter picking as a punishment. The pilot for the single judge trial was suggested in a review by Scotland's second most senior judge, Lady Dorian. Boom, boom, just mentioned her. And then enthusiastically taken up by Nicola Sturgeon and her successor, Humza Yousaf. Well, you can understand why these people want this, because it's like it gives them more power. Look, we can use this. We get this in. We'll pretend we're doing good here, bum, bum, bum. But then we'll take it on and then we'll extend that juryless to everything. So that's why they want it. In the most recent figures, the conviction rates for R and attempted R were at 51% compared to 91% for all other crimes. Yes, but we do know as a fact, and I'm not victim blaming, but we do know as a fact that some women cry this because they've had buyer's remorse, as it were. Or sometimes it's done out of vindictiveness. Sometimes it's a genuine crime, but there's no evidence. But do you want to live in a world where people are convicted because of what Nicola Sturgeon or Humza Yousaf say in a cabinet meeting? Or do you want to actually go to court, present evidence, and have your peers decide your fate based on the evidence presented? I think the second one is always going to be beneficial, which is why it is the most successful system of justice adopted all around the world. SSBA said there are particular evidential reasons for this anomaly, and it points out that they're talking about the 51% for the R. It points out that those facing murder charges, the only other offence that is exclusively the purview of the High Court of Justiciary, often face a number of different incriminatory pieces of evidence, ranging from eyewitnesses to CCTV, forensic, and nearly always a dead body that requires an explanation. This is rarely true of these R cases, where forensic and medical evidence often proves penetration, leaving the jury to consider the evidence relating to the consent, which often involves witnesses who have consumed alcohol or other substances, potentially affecting their reliability. And there she is, Dorian, desperate to become number one. And I think she's more of a number two and needs to be flushed away with all the other turds. One of the reasons the Scottish Government is keen on the plan is because what it describes as compelling evidence that jurors are influenced by myths which prejudice how they regard the complainant. They've got no evidence of these myths, though. Those myths can include expecting a genuine victim would try to fight off or escape an attacker. No, anybody knows that sometimes fear takes over and you just let it happen in order to get it over with. No, that's not a myth, that's a lie. Or that they would immediately report a crime to the police. Nope, that also is not true. Trauma, shock, fear, shame. There are many reasons why you don't report crimes like that straight away. The SSBA said juries were now directed specifically in relation to these myths and that there was no evidence to suggest that juries are acting in contravention of their oath to try the accused on the evidence in line with these directions. The Scottish Government said it was trying to solve a problem that does not in fact exist. It does not exist. Of course it does not exist. But they're going to keep pushing this myth. They're going to keep pushing this because the government want to basically get rid of juries in all trials, and they can use this as their little key, and it'll be the thin edge of a very, very terrible wedge. I'm coming up. Now, the principle here is not that there aren't enough men being convicted for this particular crime. There probably aren't. There probably is a problem with the conviction on this crime. But what we need to be aware of is the removal of juries in any trial. Because if you remove them here, then the argument will be, well, we already don't have them in this. Let's move it along to sexual assault. Let's move it along to assault. Let's move it along to, violent assault. Let's move it along to murder. And once you're getting a juryless trial at murder, well, that's the most serious crime. So you might as well have it across the lot. And then juries are gone. And then the establishment owns everything. The three pillars of the establishment are the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. And they should all be separate. But under the SNP, they are all one and the same. It is monolithic, and it is dangerous, and it is totalitarian. And do you really trust the likes of Nicola Sturgeon or Humza Yousaf or anyone to not look at this entirely without bias and say, yes, this man has been criticising my government, but we will give him a fair trial? Of course not. It'll be a show trial in 20 years and away you go. Feet won't touch. Because it is no more different than Soviet Russia, than China or North Korea. And that's the direction of travel. And that is why I'm very glad that these lawyers are fighting it. They're saying no, and everyone needs to agree with them. This needs to be rejected. Anyway, I shall stop there. Thank you very much for watching. Went on a bit longer than I planned, but can't help that. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, and I will speak to you later. Bye.